Good afternoon. A very warm welcome from the Department of Languages Integral University. This is the fourth session of the International Faculty Development Program. In our previous sessions, the distinguished guest orator enlightened the mind of faculty members with the current aspect of literary trends and currently emerging theories to give an insight into growing literature. Faculty development made a room at the heart and mind of any higher education institution to create and emphasize learner centered teaching. In higher education, there are many ways for faculty to uplift themselves. Attending conferences and training programs, getting involved in research projects, and earning online certification through various MOOC portal and through relevant FDPs. Well planned and curated FGPs are an investment in human resources and ultimately result in enhanced teaching and learning experiences. It is an effort from the Department of Languages to organize such IFDP through which eminence of knowledge could be shared with the intellectuals who are the seeker of true knowledge. Hence, Day 4 covers the topic of precarious lives and the post-millennial Indian English novel to enhance the knowledge and understanding of contemporary literature so that a new direction of learning could be achieved. Global economic prominence has inspired a fast changing literary scenes. In order to understand how Indian writing in English literature has developed over time, undertaking a neoliberal reading of the post millennial Indian English fiction across such diverse genre, we see that such fictions consciously participates in the representation and political construction of the new India as a social class that works as a proponent of economic liberalization. It also engages in the new trends of artistic production in neoliberal India. In order to give insight into the particular topic, today we have our esteemed speaker, Professor Om Prakash Dwivedi, and to welcome him, I would like to invite Dr. Mursaleen Jahan, Department of Languages, Integral University. Ma'am, over to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Aareena. My greetings of the day. I'm profoundly honored and delighted to take this opportunity to welcome and introduce Dr. Om Prakash Dwivedi, the speaker for the fourth day of International Faculty Development Program, Emerging Trends in English Literature. Thank you, Dr. Aareena. My greetings of the day. I'm profoundly honored and delighted to take this opportunity to welcome and introduce Dr. Om Prakash Dwivedi, the speaker for the fourth day International Faculty Development Program, Emerging Trends in English Literature. Dr. Om Prakash Dwivedi is Associate Professor of English Literature and Head, School of Liberal Arts, Bennett University, Noida. His areas of research interest lie in the field of Indian writing in English, post-colonial literature, and cultural studies. He has authored and edited a number of books published with reputed publishers like Palgrave, Rhodope, McFarland, and in the
I
fields
think
of IWE. He has co-authored a book titled Reorientalism and Indian Writing in English and co-edited two volumes which include Indian Writing in English and the Global Literary Market in 2013 and Tracing the New Indian Diaspora in 2014. In the field of post-colonial studies, Dr. Dwivedi has co-edited a volume on post-colonial theory in the global age in 2013 and human rights in post-colonial India in 2016. Recent publications include a special issue of Journal of Post-Colonial Writing on Fractured Identities and COVID-19. Forthcoming is a volume on representation of precarity in South Asian literature in India in English. He is the vice chair of the International Research Network Challenging Precarity, a global network. On the behalf of Integra University, I thank and bid a very hearty welcome to you, sir, for you have taken out some moments of your valuable time and joined us to share your ingenious thoughts on precarious lives and the post-millennial Indian English novel. Now I request you, sir, to address the virtual audience and cast the light of your knowledge upon all of us. Please, sir, now the screen is yours. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your very warm introduction. And I hope that I do not face the technical glitches that were visible a while ago. So, firstly, I would like to congratulate the university, the dean of the school, and the head, Dr. Arif Nadvi, and the other organizing members for putting up this kind of a faculty development workshop. When Dr. Vanya Srivastav contacted me to deliver a talk for this workshop, I was wondering what should I do because the title of the workshop was quite uh, appealing. So, in order to think what could be the emerging trends in English literature, I thought let me go for a topic that addresses and responds to the immediate crisis that the humanity at large is facing, particularly the developing nations, and in my case, or in our case, India. So I thought let me just go for a topic of precarity because precarity is something which leads to which of course is a result of the rampant neoliberal conditions and the unequal forces that shape and drive our present moment of human history. So with this, I thought that I will go for a topic on precarity, and today's topic that I'm going to talk on is precarious lives and its representation in the post-millennial Indian English novels. So the aim of this topic is to highlight how precarity is embedded within the everyday life of India, including South Asia, of course. It is driven and is structured by unequal forces of neoliberalism. The problem with neoliberalism is that it is primarily based on the idea of transactions. And when I say transactions, it means the economic transactions. So basically, what it all comes boils down to is the idea of profiteering and how much one could extract from the bodies and from the workers in particular. So neoliberalism has nothing to do with interaction, and transaction and interactions are diametrically opposed to each other because transaction doesn't require to have any kind of a human empathy, whereas interaction prerequisite condition is that you need to engage with the other, you need to talk to the other, you need to understand the other, and you need to position yourself in the place of that other. And that, of course, is the primary task of literature to prove its sociological provenance. So it becomes its transactional nature, that is the transactional nature of neoliberalism, has become so aggressively calculative in the post 1990s. That is where the neoliberal period starts, that lives are categorized into livable and non-livable categories. The representations of precarity in this paper will make us look at the capitalist social relations that have emerged in India post 1990s. The post 1990s have led to the or have unfolded kind of precarious conditions where uncertainty, instability have become the driving points of our human lives. And these conditions, they demarcate the overall discourse on precarity and precariousness of the present times. Not negating, and I'm not questioning all the good things that neoliberalism has done, or the brighter side of neoliberalism, which of course lies in its ability to provide uh, jobs and opportunities to plenty of people all around the world. But that is where the problem lies. At one, on the one hand, it provides job, and on the other, if we examine those conditions of the job or the workforce that emanate from this kind of ideology, we will find, to use Slave's term, that this kind of an ideology, what it does is it borrows from the future, and it borrows from the future of the working class in particular, due to its extractive practices, which simultaneously cancel out the future of the working class. So precarity, what we get is a state of precarity or precariousness, which emanate from the precariat itself. And this leads or unfolds to the kind of uncertain futures in the wake of neoliberal capitalism. So these generalized risks and the increased vulnerabilities that we get to see is what this paper identifies as precarity, which are embedded in our everyday approach of human life in India as well as in different parts of South Asia. So, this paper argues that the ontological insecurity generated by neoliberal capitalism and enforced by the state corporations complex renders a quantitative leap in the formation of precarity within India. And now I will move on to the next part of this paper, that is to establish a kind of a relationship between neoliberalism and precarity. The salience of terms such as precarity, precariousness, and precariat, according to Emily Hogg, lies in, I quote, the way they are put to work by individuals and groups in order to contribute to the reshaping of those social realities, unquote. Society, I argue, is seen as a category that gives space to the excluded. However, the gap between the rich and the poor within India, and for that matter, South Asia as well, has widened remarkably in the new liberal age. And this has been made possible largely because of the state's extensive support to corporations, which has created a kind of society that is increasingly capitalist. Life continues to become more precarious as we witness new forms of capitalist exploitations in this region. Arguably, as capitalist forces continue to expand and take control of our daily lives, a larger section of society within this region has been rendered uncertain. Hence, it is needed to conceptualize frameworks which can provide us with a lens to examine the compromised ontological conditions of the present moment that give rise to the social spaces, often in contexts of highly asymmetrical relations of power. These reconfigurations, driven by aggressive political systems and the subsequent subjugated social fabrics, produce precariousness that permeates most of India's life. That is the post 1990s India life. Precarity as a life condition permeates both the global north and the global south. So I'm not just talking about India. Of course, the focus of this paper is India, but precarity as a condition has become a general framework, has become a general condition of the entire world, that is to say. But they exist in different forms and different manifestations. The dominant role of the International Monetary Fund, that is the IMF, and its agenda is being driven largely by the United States, has concomitantly led to undermining of social conditions in India and other parts of South Asia, resulting in a more intensified precariousness in the region. Arundhati Roy, for example, relate these transformations, these ongoing transformations, to neoliberal capitalism, which has seemingly undermined the democratic sovereignty of developing nations. Evidently, what Roy does through her work is that she exposes the covert relationship of neoliberal capitalism and nation states. Actually, what Roy argues in a work on the algebra of infinite justice is she shows through her arguments that how the neoliberal framework or how the neoliberal ideologies has led to the kind of a downfall in different forms of assets. And those assets are the physical assets, the the human assets, and the social assets, which are very vital to sustain and nourish the elemental forms of human life. Apparently, the process of neoliberalism has opened up a huge set of debates. One comes across various definitional frameworks of neoliberalism, making it a very vexed theory. On the one hand, we have proponents such as Jonathan Church, Henry Simons, Scott Summer, Joseph Alois Scumpeter, Jagdish Bhagwati, Louis Ruiger, to name a few, who defend neoliberal ideologies and practices primarily on the grounds of their liberatory and empowering nature. On the other hand, we have opponents such as Samir Amin, David Harvey, Wendy Brown, Jigment Bowman, Pankaj Mishra, Arundhati Roy, Pablo Mukherjee, Rashmi Verma, Tavish Khair, among others, who critique neoliberalism due to its extractive nature, which operates to maximize profit at the cost of human life and environmental catastrophe. In academic discussions on cultural productions, the term precarity is often used as a precursor to postmodern. Uh, According to Michel Manley, the neoliberal economy retained a structure of economic control whose roots went far back as the 17th century. No wonder then that Alex Wansbrough, in his book Capitalism and the Enchanted Screen, argues that, and I quote him, neoliberalism encourages paranoia as we become aware that we are always watched. Our performance at work, and indeed at life more generally, in the age of social media, is evaluated and ranked. So, what Alex Wansbrough is doing here is pointing to the presence of the cameras at workplaces, on roads, almost in all our everyday walk of uh, in our everyday walk of life. So our life, our activities, everything we do are getting captured in cameras. So we are being watched. Our activities are being watched with a sole motive that the performance and the productivity needs to be increased, and that is a kind of a condition that leads to what Jung Chul Han argues in his excellent book, and he uses the term the burnout society. So this kind of a surveillance culture leads, I argue, it leads to the condition of the burnout society, which of course is directly related to neoliberalism. So neoliberalism is often taken for granted as a concept that equates freedom and democracy with the market. Now, freedom and democracy are quite opposite to the market. Market has a different role, whereas democracy has a different role altogether. Milton Friedman, an architect of neoliberalism in the US and UK, but also Chile, succinctly encapsulates the link between politics and economics in a doctrinaire manner. And I quote, there is an intimate connection between economics and politics that only certain combinations of political and economic arrangements are possible. And that in particular, a society which is socialist cannot also be democratic in the sense of guaranteeing individual freedom, unquote. For Friedman, the market is, I quote, a direct component of freedom, unquote. But this also explains the reason why the economies are prioritized over welfare measures. This equation, however, leads to a jettisoning of a care mentality. For example, Friedman argues against public housing, calling it paternalism, complaining to the extent that such kind of an approach would be better to just give poor people money. Evidently, he also opposed minimum wage laws and collective structures that limited the powers of corporations. For Friedman, capitalism was the source of freedom. As such, Friedman seems to provide a clear example as one of the key proponents of monetarism, of neoliberal thought. I have developed my framework of neoliberalism that I have just discussed primarily from the book of Tavish Khair, and the title of the book is The New Xenophobia. In his book, Khair suggests that neoliberalism, unlike capitalism, marks a loosening up of the relations between capital, production, and labor, with a relative abandonment of the traditional notion of labor. The idea of labor has changed in the modern days, right? You can be exploited from sitting from your workplace, even sitting from your house, sorry to say. Under neoliberalism, free play of capital, Khair argues, can lead to profit, and much of financial capital is not invested in production or trade. In that condition, the state of the human being, someone who must work for his or her existence, is rendered precarious in ways that include the old proletariat, but also exceed it, go beyond it. Khair's conceptualization of neoliberalism makes us see that neoliberal governance has extended its control over all kinds of workers, not just the old time laborers. And in so doing, it has turned a large population in South Asia, to include India as well, into precariats. With the advent of artificial means of production, what Alexander Wansbrough was arguing, that is, machine doing the work and and humans being captured by the camera, and the advent of a mindset that sees unions as an impediment, and the advent also of a neoliberal emphasis on the self, the advent of part-time work without benefits, short-term contracts, precarity has become, I argue, an everyday feature of South Asian life. I will now quickly define precarity, precariat, and precariousness, and then I will move on to its representation in Indian post-millennial Indian novels in English. Precarity, precariat, and precariousness are theoretical tools used in a range of contexts. Ever since Judith Butler used the term to denote a shared ontological condition of exposure and interdependencies of bodies. She writes, and I quote, life requires various social and economic conditions to be met in order to be sustained as a life, unquote. And precariousness for Butler indicates living socially, open to the, I quote again, the fact that one's life is always, in some sense, in the hands of the other, unquote. The notion of co-vulnerability or interconnectedness lies at the heart of Butler's theorization of precarity. This conforms to the Oxford English Dictionary, which points out that the Latin word precarious means given as a favor or depending on the favor of another person. That means it is entirely choice based, situational, and relational, nothing which can be seen as a kind of a conditioned outcome. As a term and a concept, precarity predates Butler's work. Critics like Andrea Mollebach define precarity as, I quote, a shorthand for those of us documenting the multiple forms of nightmarish disposition and injury that our age entails, unquote. An age of stupid, as pointed out by Fortin. I now move to the last part of my paper, that is post-millennial Indian novels in English, and how they represent the theme of precarity. Indian English literature, as we know, has come a long way and holds an important position in the global literary scene. Indian writers settled in India and abroad, critics, poets, dramatists, and novelists, have made significant contributions to the overall development of this field. What could certainly be seen as anchored to the lure of colonial education, unfolding to nationalist imaginings, which Jessica Berman sees as the Bildungsroman genre in a work of 2006, and the arrival to the post colonial decades. Indian English literature over the years, I argue, has diversified a lot, leading to the rise of diasporic writing, subaltern studies, translation studies, post colonial studies, and the latest edition of precarity studies. When we talk of the rise of any field, and in this case, the rise of the field of Indian writing in English, particularly the post millennial Indian English novels, we also need to look at the patterns that scaffold and ontologize it. That is, we also need to look at the other side, that other side of the conditions that are hidden. Location of the writer, the reception of literary work, narratives of dark India, anxiety of Englishness, issues of representation and hence uh, authenticity, global literary marketplaces, cultural gatekeepers are some of the overriding issues that pervade the field of Indian writing in English. The post 1980s combed Indian English literature, the novel genre in particular, rendering it not only a new look, but also increased attention across the world. As Ulka Anjaria avers, I quote, the post 1980s Indian novels own investment in the hold of the colonial national past on India's present has affected our reading of the entire genre to such a degree that the field of Indian novelist studies is almost entirely dependent on a critique of historicity, unquote. As more voices emerge to fill in the microhistory of India's nationalism and socio-cultural formulations, triggering a resistance to meta-narratives, the field continues to witness exponential growth. And this rise matches with the rise of English readership in India. It is not surprising since India now claims to be the world's second largest English speaking country. The most reliable estimate is around 10% of its population, or 125 million people, second only to the US, according to data generated by BBC.com in the year 2012. So that's a data about almost a decade ago. In fact, critics such as Urvashi Butalia, Priya Kumari, and Amandes suggest that India is already the biggest global publisher of English language fiction. From this vantage point, Ulka Anjaria makes a case that, I quote, India itself is the site of its futurity, unquote. Anjaria's optimism is based on the trend of the current movements of some of the Indian writers in English, such as Shashi Tharoor, Arvind Adiga, Chetan Bhagat, back to India, as well as writers such as Arundhati Roy, Manu Joseph, Amish Tripathi, and others who never left India. Likewise, Harish Trivedi underlines the popularity of these India-based writers. I quote him, who sell better in India than Salman Rushdie or Vikram Seth or Amitabh Ghosh ever did. And they don't seem to give a damn if they are not shortlisted for the Booker or the Pulitzer, unquote. Trivedi puts it pertinently that, I quote him again, the rise of the consumerist middle class in India has indeed led to the rise of the popular Indian English novel, unquote. The turn to these new sites of identity production and dissemination also solicits new critical frameworks to understand the present tensions that underpin the rhetoric of India shining. Hence, the focus of this paper is not to chart any literary history of Indian English novels. Rather, I attempt to look at a certain historical point, that is the post-millennial moment, and its representation in many of the precarity novels, a new genre in the literary field. Building on Butler's and Liam Connell's work on precarity novels, I argue that the rise of neoliberalism has subsequently rendered life precarious. Novels such as Chetan Bhagat's One Night at Call Center, Arvind Adiga's The White Tiger, Brinda S. Narayan's Bangalore Calling, Prayag Akbar's Leela, Neil Mukherjee's State of Freedom, Tabish Khair's Night of Happiness, among others, can be seen as precarity novels. Arguably, such novels, according to Liam Connell, and I quote, are useful for appreciating Indian responses to the new forms of global work in India. These responses involve contradictory desires to celebrate and lament the changes to Indian society that these uh, work reflect. Even a cursory unquote, even a cursory look at such precarity novels make us realize that the accelerated privatization and the attendant laws of social securities underpin the 1990 moments in India. India's rise as a major international economy can be situated in the 1990s, which was also punctuated by the 1991 debt crisis. It was only with the IMF's intervention that Indian government could revive the economy, that too at the cost of accelerated privatization and economic liberalism. The rise of economy was therefore met with a decline in the social structures of welfare, be it the education sector or the health sector. Evidently, anxiety, job insecurity, 0 hour employment, environmental degradation, poor healthcare system, long working hours, aided and abetted by the surveillance cultures, bioeconomies, fragmented family are the new conditions of our neoliberal age, which Jung Chalhan identify as the symptoms of the burnout society. Precarity, precariousness, and precariat, therefore, are terms used to refer to uncertain futures and vulnerable lives in the wake of neoliberal capitalism. These generalized risks and increased vulnerabilities, which I have pointed already, they can be conceptualized as precarity because they are symptomatic of our everyday neoliberal age. and they set out to reflect the inequalities which are deeply embedded in our social system. Right? Seen from this context, there is enough merit in Pallavi Rastogi's call for global conversation on precarity, vulnerable, and suffering, not only because they have preoccupied the human race through the ages, but also because our present moment, that is the now, the here. On a similar note, Pramod K. Nair conceptualizes eco-precarity to focus on the very real threats and uncertainties in which humanity generally lives today. Nair's concerns also prefigures in Amitav Ghosh's The Great Derangement. In the wake of rising social and economic insecurity, changing nature of work, the tasks to repair and revive are not a one time or a singular task. Rather, they demand a continuous engagement, which can help us to find our strength even when our dreams are shattered. For example, Ramlal, one of the precarious characters in Neil Mukherjee's A Street of Freedom, clings to the memory from the past of a rich boy who had given them who had given him tangerines from a bag inside the car. And I quote from the novel: all he wanted to be was the pampered son of a rich man who rode in cars and looked out at the world from behind a pane of glass, which could be lifted up or down depending on how much of the world you wanted it could be turned on or off like a tap. Unquote. However, in Ramlal's experience of inadequate social assets that could drive him to upward social mobility rarely exists in the neoliberal India. And that is what he says. You had to be born into the life inside. That is, you have to be co opted by the rich. Given the wider implications of a compromised social infrastructure in neoliberal India, a point can be made that precarity has come to represent a multitude of subjects. Referring to the global south, Adam Getachew posits that the world making after empire illustrates, and I quote, the limits of socialist nation building. And she therefore argues that the state should be empowered to regulate private actors, unquote, not questioning or critiquing the economic growth of the country in the recent past. The idea of this paper is to look at and test corollary of the gains, since it provides the optics to see the living conditions of neoliberal society. This juxtaposition of the economic with the bios, that is the life, has evidently resulted in extremely uneven life conditions, giving rise to the multitude subjects, which can never be flattened or leveled into sameness, unity, and identity. What therefore combines the multitude is their differences, those we get to see in the conceptual purchase of precarity. Seeing precariat as the weak multitude makes us record its varying degree of vulnerability that has spread thinly over a large section of society in the neoliberal India. Let me exemplify this with a turn to Prayag Akbar's novel Leela. In one of the deeply disturbing scenes in the novel, the protagonist Shalini expresses her annoyance with the insecure life that she is forced to live. And she laments it in this particular paragraph, which I quote. A sense of security is our abiding illusion, unquote. This illusion of security, economic as well as health, is reinforced throughout the novel by Akbar. The sense of abiding insecurity permanently makes her a vulnerable character. This pathogenic vulnerability, to use Pramod K. Nair's term, where the security measures that exist to reduce and decimate such vulnerability only worsens it. For example, listen to what another character in the novel Deepanati says. I quote from that novel. Atul, her husband tells me all the time, that's why I couldn't call you home. Community is the most important thing these nowadays. We have to be careful what the neighbors think. Meeting you today was risk enough. That's why no one would come today, not one of the gang. We aren't allowed to meet tower people, you know. It's too much risk. I just can't. I won't bring any risk to my kids. Unquote. Shalini's entry into the area where the scavenger community lives makes us see her emerging as a part of a bigger vulnerable population that resides in the urban India. And this is being further substantiated by another woman character who tells Sapna that even Sapna residing in the tower, where those who provide various services to the council and its ministries are kept. People like Shalini in the towers may have broken the council's rules about purity and about not meeting the higher class. But as the woman says, they still have toilets, fans, electricity, flush. See Rands, I quote from the novel. Even when they break the rules, they are too good to be put out here with us. We don't get anything. We don't deserve it. The hot air from the air conditioners pumping air into the sectors causes fires in the slums. Unquote. Similarly, trauma, loneliness, and corporate employee scenes are evidently found in Tavish Khair's new novel, The Night of Happiness. The protagonist, Ahmed, a bilingual working in a very big company owned by Anil Mehrotra, Ahmed fervently believes that all distances are infinite, except those of the heart. Perhaps that might have prompted him to learn several languages. Well versed to strike a deal for Anil, with his fluency and oratory skills, Ahmed is yet to find a language that can reach the heart of his boss Anil. Arguably, Ahmed's sense of vulnerability arises from the resolute deafness of his boss, who always questions his loyalty and treats him only as a worker. He wants someone to hear to his inner conflicts, his sense of trauma, loneliness, largely a construct of his identity. He is always looked upon with a sense of suspicion by his boss, underlining the true corporate boss relationship that one mostly finds, bereft of any emotions. Fueled, of course, as it is by the logic of profit and solipsism. It is in such a disillusioned moment that Ahmed says, and I quote from the novel, who can stand for the security of the future? One either has debt or one has time. Debt is a slap in the face of time. Unquote. The bigger irony, however, is Ahmed's time is mostly spent in the accumulation of wealth for Anil's company, a company which never cares for Ahmed's own future or the everyday trauma that he is undergoing. Ahmed evidently turns out to be a victim of what Rob Nixon uses the term slow violence, or to use Jung Chul Han's terms again, the burnout figure. Not able to cope up with the extreme corporate culture and his loneliness, he commits suicide. Such representations of precarity in Indian writing in English, particularly in the post-millennial moment, make us look at the capitalist state nexus that have emerged in different parts of the world. Of course, even in India, in the post 1990s, subsequently weakening the safety net of the working class. Reading of such precarity novels therefore requires us to think through the ruins of social infrastructures that are central to our health and matters of education, including environmental sustainability. That is why Laura Stola contends that, I quote, this is not a turn to the ruins as memorialized monumental leftovers or relics, but rather to what people are left with, to what remains blocking livelihoods and health, to the aftershocks of imperial assault, to the social afterlife of structures, sensibilities, and things, unquote. There exists, I argue, a hand in glove relationship of neoliberalism and the nation states. In this new kind of governance promoted by the neoliberal ideologies, the realm is raw capital, made possible by conquests of emerging markets, profits, and borders limitless. Simon During points to the crisis emanating from the age of neoliberalism as the politics of subalternity largely absorbed into the machinery of emergent neoliberal state capitalism. During further argues that the subaltern politics has given way for a new class, that is the precariat. Consequently, During marks a new turn to precarity through the vertical and horizontal expansion of the subaltern class. It is in this way during, as Janet Wilson, she is giving a talk tomorrow, Christina Gaines Fernandez, and I have argued elsewhere, situates the dilemma of the post 1990s social reality arising out of neoliberal crisis. The attempt, therefore, at the present juncture should be to understand the ongoing social transformations and how life has become increasingly uncertain and dark due to neoliberal rationality that involves extending and disseminating market values to all institutions and social actions. So, in this way, I put up a kind of a template that since 1990s, the emergence of the open market has also led to the emergence of uh, an exponential source of exploitation for the market. And if you examine Indian writing in English, particularly the novels which have been published after 2000, you will find that there is an overriding presence of this theme. So I will stop it here, and I'm open to questions, if any.
Dear participants, you can type your questions in the comment section for the question answer session. We are waiting for that. Dear participants, you can type your questions in the comment section for the question answer session. We are waiting for your comments, for your questions.
I think there is no question, right?
Yes, sir, it seems to
So
be.
if faculty members have anything to ask or
Yes, yes,
to,
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are in the process. We are just going to start that. Thank you, Dr. Om Prakash Dwivedi. Sir has accepted our invitation and spare time from his busy schedule. It was really a humble initiative, and every word of Sir is exhibiting his scholarship. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Rajaskari, Faculty Department of Languages, to give a vote of thanks to our guests and participants. Please, sir.
Uh, First of all, thank you, Aareena ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to give a vote of thanks. And as we conclude today's session, I, Sayyid Raj Askari, express my gratitude on behalf of the Department of Languages to the Honorable Speaker, Professor Om Prakash Dwivedi, Head School of Liberal Arts, Bennett University. So, your lecture on today's topic, Precarious Lives and the Post-Millennial Indian English Novels, has indeed been an illuminating one. Dear Professor, I would like to congratulate you on behalf of the Department of Languages, Integral University, for showing your knowledge with us and for inspiring the participants with such insightful knowledge. Sir, you have opened the corridors of knowledge that will surely be traversed by our participants in future. The way you have explained the surveillance culture and that was commendable. And the concept of new liberalism would be deeper insight for the participants. I would like to express my gratitude to Honorable Chancellor Professor S.W. Akhtar for providing us this rostrum for achieving academic excellence. My sincere appreciation for the efforts of Pro-Chancellor Dr. Syed Nadeem Akhtar and Vice-Chancellor Professor Javed Musarrat sir for initiating the online International Faculty Development Program for the holistic development of our teaching fraternity. I also thank Dr. H.M. Arif Nadwi, Head, Department of Languages, for encouraging us and supporting us in organizing such interesting sessions. I also extend gratitude to Dr. Aareena and Ms. Vanya for successful coordination and organization for this FD. And thank you, Mursaleen ma'am, for introducing the speaker to our participants. Dear Professor Dwivedi, we hope that you will bestow upon our teachers and researchers the treasures of your knowledge in future as well. In the end, but not the least, I would like to thank the entire teaching fraternity of the Department of Languages, Dr. Arif Usmani, the supporting staff, the logistic help, and all those who have patiently attended this session. Your participation is highly appreciated. It has been a splendid afternoon, and sir, you have given voice to the voiceless. You are a true ambassador of knowledge. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks to the entire team, and I wish
Sir,
you good luck.
sir, there's one question
Yeah,
which is
please.
seeking your attention, and we are just going to display this.
Sure. Can we really regain control? This is a question which demands not one but plenty of books. Can we regain control over precarity? It's almost very impossible kind of a thing, because precarity is a condition that emanates out of a kind of a collusive consent between the state and the capitalists, right? So you see it through the example of what happened during the pandemic when people were dying everywhere, all around the world. The governments in some part of the world, what were they doing? They secretly, without uh, letting anyone know, they secretly increase the working hours of the labor, of the of the workers. So these are the moment at times which are the moments of emergency. One should rather try to engender and strengthen the social assets. But what happens is the opposite, because these are these moments of emergencies are utilized by the nexus, what Amitabh Ghosh terms at deep states. He uses the term deep states for this collusive kind of a relationship between the state and the capitalists, right? So at a time when more help was needed from state, what we ended up getting was something opposite: the increase in the working hours. So it's a very difficult situation. The only thing we can do, and that is where literature becomes very handy, is to respond to the crisis, is to expose this kind of a mentality that underpins the neoliberal life, not just in India, but precarity is a condition that can be found in Europe and in different parts of the world as well. I know so many of my friends who work in different organizations, and they all suffer from this kind of a precarious condition. So it's not something that we, uh, I mean, it's difficult to erase it altogether. But yes, through the response of literature, we can at least expose these conditions. We can at least create some kind of a resilience to tone down the kind of the burnout syndromes that the society is facing. That is what literature can all do, as through its turn or through its approach of a therapeutic model, right? So that is the only solution and only hope we have. To say that we can regain control over precarity is a very uh, optimistic vision, which I endorse, and that is why I keep on writing, addressing this issue of precarity through my work. And let's hope that there can be some kind of a respite, and we can overcome these precarious conditions. But it is a very deep state, right? So it will not be very easy to tone it down or to downplay these precarious conditions. That is why I will just stop it here. Slavoj Zizek uses a term that he uses a phrase. In fact, he says that the way these system, the state and the capitalist class have been established, they work with a particular model, and their model is quite simple. To use two things: one is the body, and the other is the time. And body and the time are the only two things that human beings have, which Martin Hugland, in his famous book, I'm not able to recall his latest book, but he uses the term finitude. He says that human beings are defined by only one category, and that category is the category of finitude, because human beings only have time. They don't have anything else. And this is the thing: the time, and of course your body, the time for which your body exists, matter a lot to this neoliberal kind of an ideology, because this is through these two things, the time and the body, that you can be a source of you can be exploited, you can be extracted, and you can be used as a profit model for the others to deepen their deepen their pockets. I hope I have addressed your question at least in some part.
So there's one more question. Is new liberalism a positive connotation?
There is already a great deal of controversy, and not one but plenty of articles and several books written on it. I have already figured it out in my paper that there are two different groups, right? One group which sees neoliberalism as something very which eulogize this neoliberal condition and see it very in positivist formulations and conditions. On the other, we have a different set of group who believe, and for right reasons, that neoliberalism has led to a kind of a condition which does not sustain the elemental forms of life. So I will leave this for you to address and for you to figure out how do you see neoliberalism, because it has been envisioned, it has been formulated differently by different critics. But my idea of neoliberalism, as I said in my paper, has been derived from Tavish Khair's book of the new xenophobia, in which he sees neoliberalism as a kind of a new form of relationship that has emerged, that sets a kind of a that locks the capital, the production, and the labor within one framework. And in these times, in the present context, what you are saying, capital flows in invisible ways. You cannot see capital, but it will flow. The cryptocurrency is just one example to make a case here. And also labor. You do not need to go to the office or any organizations, or for that matter anywhere, to render your services. You can be extracted, you can be exploited sitting from any corner of the world, where due to the rise in the technology that has you need to uh, you must read the book by Alexander Andreas Wansbrough, Digital Media and Enchantment, where he has addressed all these questions that you are asking. So neoliberalism, for me, I'm giving my position, is a negative terminology, although it has given rise to number of jobs. But at the same time, and here I will give you a figure that is uh, given by not just one organization but plenty of organizations, and I will start with the WHO. The World Health Organization has given a data that since 1990s, and 1990s is the point from where the rampant push for neoliberal ideologies start happening. So WHO says that since 1990s, there have been a rampant rise in the case of anxiety and trauma and stress. The similar figure has also been substantiated by the world's leading journal, Lancet. Lancet also drives home the same point that since 1990s, there has been an exponential rise in the number of stress cases across the world, not just India, across the world. This is a case which Yuval Noah Harari, in his book, also tries to address. And in fact, he goes on to say that by 2030, the world that we are going to get, he's talking about the younger population. He says that the younger population is going to be a very fragile population, because they will be extremely stressed out, burnout, and they will need more attention and more care. So I will stop it here.
Thank you, sir, for your remarkable insight on precarious post-millennial theory. You are really a gem of literature.
Thank you. So I can leave, right?
Sure, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Bye.
Thank you, dear participants. You all have been added through our Learning Management System Integral Learning Initiative, which is also known as ILI. A question has been posted under Module 1, Focus Discussion Forum. Kindly go through it. Just to log in with your ID and password already shared with you. If you are facing any problem, kindly contact Sir Usmani to sort out your technical issues. He is available there in the WhatsApp group. Dear participants, you have been a source of inspiration for us. Keep connecting us for tomorrow's session. You will have been informed through WhatsApp. Keep watching us. Have a rainy day.